Hello, and welcome aboard, dear dreamers and curious minds. Tonight we're drifting gently into the quiet world of the sea, where creatures move without haste and mysteries unfold like slow tides. Our guide tonight, the humble, enchanting starfish, a creature without feet yet full of movement, grace, and wonder. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Are you near the coast or far inland, dreaming of oceans from your quiet room? Let us know in the comments. It always warms our hearts to hear from you. Now let's slowly dive beneath the surface and discover how these magical beings walk the ocean floor without a single foot. Beneath the quiet surface of the ocean, where the light begins to soften and the sounds of the world above are silenced by the weight of water, there exists a realm where movement is not rushed, but graceful, subtle, and serene. Here, lying across rocks, coral, and soft sands, the starfish begins to stir. It doesn't have legs, knees, or toes. It doesn't have muscles like ours, and yet it moves ever so slowly, with a strange elegance that seems to belong more to dreams than to science. At first glance, a starfish appears motionless, like a statue placed delicately in a tide pool. Its arms stretch out like rays from a quiet sun, unmoving, as though forever still. But if you were to wait, not just for a few seconds, but for minutes or even hours, you would begin to notice a transformation. Like the hour hand on a clock, its arms begin to glide forward, one after another, the entire creature creeping across the seafloor in search of food, shelter, or simply the next place to rest. There is a kind of meditative beauty to this movement. It's not a leap or a sprint. There are no jolts or jerks. It's a slow unfolding, like a flower blooming in reverse, folding and stretching as it moves. And though we might be tempted to think of motion only in terms of legs and feet, the starfish invites us to look deeper, to reconsider what it really means to walk. It doesn't follow the rules we expect. It doesn't lift one part of its body to push forward. Instead, it uses something so small, so intricate, and so coordinated that we can barely see it happening. Underneath its body, for you, tucked beneath each arm, are tiny structures that look like miniature straws or tiny fingers. These are its tube feet. There can be hundreds, even thousands, and each one moves in harmony with the others, working together to create a kind of rolling glide across the ocean floor. But at this point, in the early dawn of the starfish's journey, nothing looks deliberate. It seems like the ocean itself is carrying the creature forward. The gentle pulse of the current, the fine dusting of sand that lifts beneath its arms, the trail that it leaves behind. All of it feels like part of a quiet, invisible rhythm. It is easy to think of walking as a loud thing, shoes hitting pavement, footsteps echoing in halls. But the starfish reminds us that walking can be silent, that it can be soft, that the body can move with intention and purpose even when it looks like it's standing still. To watch a starfish begin to move is like witnessing a secret. It doesn't perform, it doesn't demand attention, it simply begins, without fanfare, to make its way across the world beneath the waves. And in that first gentle step, a step taken without feet, without sound, without rush, the ocean whispers its first lesson of the night. That all motion begins in stillness, that even the most unlikely travellers can find their way, and that sometimes the most fascinating journeys are the ones we can barely see. If you were to gently lift a starfish from the seafloor and turn it over, being ever so careful as if holding a delicate piece of living art, you would be met with a surprising sight. Beneath its arms, instead of something flat or simple, you'd see rows and rows of tiny translucent limbs. They're so small they may appear almost invisible at first, like threads of glass catching the light. These are the starfish's tube feet, its secret to walking without feet. Each arm of the starfish holds hundreds of these tiny feet, all perfectly aligned in grooves that run from the centre of its body outward to the tip of each arm. And these aren't just passive structures. They're alive, moving, responding, and coordinating with one another. When you look closely, you might even see them wriggling slightly, feeling the water, tasting the surface beneath them, sensing the world in ways we can hardly imagine. Tube feet are marvels of natural engineering, soft yet strong, flexible yet precise. Each one ends in a tiny suction cup, and though they are no wider than a grain of rice, they can grasp firmly onto rocks, shells, and even other sea creatures. When the starfish decides to move, it doesn't lift itself like we do. Instead, these tube feet begin to work in waves, expanding and contracting, pulling and releasing, guiding the starfish along like an invisible conveyor belt powered by water and will. What makes this even more fascinating is how the starfish operates them. It has no brain, no commander giving out marching orders, yet the feet move in near perfect harmony. It's not one arm that leads, but a collective rhythm, a kind of choreography played out on the ocean floor. The starfish can choose to lead with any of its arms. It doesn't have a head after all. Instead, it simply shifts direction by giving different tube feet the job of pulling. To understand how this is possible, we have to go deeper into the very system that powers these tiny feet. Inside each starfish is a hydraulic system unlike anything humans possess. Rather than using muscles the way we do, starfish use water. They draw in seawater through a special opening on their upper side and then channel it through a series of internal canals. This water is pressurized and directed into the tube feet, causing them to extend and contract. Each tube foot is like a miniature piston, expanding when filled with water, contracting when that water is withdrawn. The suction is created when the foot presses against a surface and then slightly deflates, creating a vacuum that holds it firmly into place. This allows the starfish to climb vertical rocks, hang upside down from coral, or remain firmly attached to a spot even when waves and currents try to push it away. This ability isn't just about movement, it's about touch, about sensing. Each tube foot can taste, feel, and react. In a way, the starfish explores the world not with eyes or ears, but with hundreds of tiny sensitive limbs that feel everything beneath it. Imagine walking through life not by looking where you're going, but by sensing every step with the soles of your feet, knowing the temperature, the texture, and even the taste of the ground. And yet, for all this complexity, there is no rush in the starfish's motion. The tube feet move patiently, carefully, thoughtfully. As they press, pull, and glide across sand and stone, they write a silent poem in the language of touch and water. No sound, no hurry, just pure fluid movement, a walking style that belongs to another world slower than ours, but no less purposeful. When we think of movement, we often picture bold strides and fast momentum, but the starfish, with its hundreds of tiny feet, teaches us a quieter lesson. That movement can be gentle, that steps taken slowly can still cover great distances, and that even without feet you can leave a footprint, not in the sand but in the rhythm of the sea. So the next time you see a starfish in a tide pool or resting on a rock, remember that beneath its arms an entire world of motion waits quietly, 1,000 tiny explorers guiding it one soft step at a time. Beneath the starfish's tough, leathery skin lies one of the most remarkable systems in the natural world. A system that doesn't rely on bones or muscles to move, but on the silent, invisible force of water. While humans depend on blood vessels and muscle fibers to control our limbs, the starfish operates in an entirely different way. It moves, holds, and explores its world using a hydraulic system, one powered not by effort or energy in the traditional sense, but by the ebb and flow of seawater through its body. At the centre of this system is something called the water vascular system, a network of canals, chambers and valves that together act as the starfish's internal engine. Unlike engines built of steel or circuits, this one is soft, fluid and organic. And yet it is astonishingly efficient. It begins with a small, almost unnoticeable structure on the upper side of the starfish, a porous, sieve-like plate called the madreporite, often mistaken for a tiny shell pressed into the skin. But this little structure is the gateway to motion. Through the madreporite, seawater flows into the starfish's body, entering a long canal that leads down to a circular ring hidden at the centre of the starfish, the ring canal. From this ring, radial canals branch outward into each of the starfish's arms like spokes of a wheel. Along these canals are dozens, sometimes hundreds of ampullae, small bulb-like sacs that look almost like tiny medicine droppers. Each ampulla is connected to a tube foot, and it is here that the magic of movement begins. When the starfish wants to move, it begins by contracting the ampulla, forcing water into the attached tube foot. This causes the foot to elongate, reaching out like a tiny finger. When it touches the surface, it creates a suction, a gentle vacuum that holds it fast. Then, by relaxing the ampulla, the foot draws back, releasing its grip. By coordinating this push-pull motion across hundreds of tube feet, the starfish can walk, climb, and even pry open prey. But this isn't just a mechanical process, it is also a beautifully orchestrated dance. The water inside the starfish must be carefully balanced. Not too much, not too little. Too much pressure, and the tube feet might overextend. Too little, and they won't grip at all. The starfish constantly adjusts, regulating the flow and pressure of water throughout its body, responding to the shape of the seafloor, the direction of the current, and the feel of the rocks beneath it. What makes this system even more wondrous is that it works in total silence. There is no heartbeat, no muscle strain, no grinding of joints, only the quiet press and release of water, a natural hydraulic rhythm that pulses through the starfish's limbs like a whispered tide. If you could shrink yourself and travel inside, you would not hear the hum of machinery or the beat of blood. You would hear only the gentle trickle of water, the faint expansion of tube feet, and the soothing sigh of an organism completely in tune with its liquid world. In this way, water is more than just something outside the starfish, and it is something within. It is the force that fills it, moves it, supports it. The ocean doesn't simply surround the starfish, it powers it from the inside out. Every step it takes is borrowed from the sea. Every movement a shared motion between creature and current. This fluid-based movement also grants the starfish incredible adaptability. If one arm is damaged, the others can take over. If the surface changes, the starfish adjusts instantly, sending water to the tube feet that need it most. It can cling to slick rocks, crawl over jagged coral, and even move upside down, all with the same slow, steady ease. Perhaps what is most enchanting is the lesson this teaches us, that strength doesn't always roar. That motion can be gentle, subtle, and soft, yet still powerful. That water, so often underestimated, can move mountains and starfish. So the next time you wade into a tide pool or gaze into an aquarium and you see a starfish slowly gliding across the glass, remember that beneath its surface, a quiet miracle is unfolding. Water is flowing, feet are reaching, and a creature without bones or blood is walking with the grace of a whisper, one careful step at a time. If you were to gently run your fingers across the top of a starfish, you might notice a small hardened spot, a little lighter in colour than the rest of its body, almost like a pebble pressed into the flesh. It may seem insignificant, just another detail on a mysterious creature, but this tiny structure, barely larger than a freckle, is the key to one of the most fascinating and otherworldly systems in the natural world. It's called the madreporite, a word that sounds like something from ancient myths, and fittingly so, because what it does borders on magical. The madreporite is the gateway to motion. Without it, the starfish would be still, inert, unable to explore or eat or survive. Despite its small size, it performs the delicate and essential role of regulating the flow of seawater into the starfish's internal hydraulic system, the water vascular system. You see, the starfish doesn't move with muscles or bones. It doesn't have tendons or ligaments pulling and pushing it forward. Instead, it relies on water, not just as a habitat, but as a living force that flows inside it, powering its every step. The madreporite acts like a valve, a filter, and a pressure regulator all at once. When the starfish needs to move, it first needs water, not just surrounding it, but inside it. Seawater enters the madreporite and begins its journey down a stone canal, a narrow tube that leads to the central ring canal at the core of the starfish's body. From there, water is distributed into each arm through radial canals, filling small balloon-like sacs called ampulla. These sacs contract and relax, pushing water into the starfish's tube feet, those delicate finger-like extensions we learned about earlier, causing them to extend, grip, and move. But here's the truly astonishing part. All of this is orchestrated silently and automatically by the madreporite. It filters the incoming water, ensuring no particles, debris, or harmful substances enter the internal system. Imagine a miniature version of a pool filtration system, perfectly scaled and biologically integrated, constantly working without ever needing maintenance. The madreporite even helps regulate internal pressure, adjusting the starfish's hydraulic tension as it climbs rocks, turns over clams, or navigates slippery surfaces. If the ocean is the bloodstream of the planet, then the madreporite is a tap into that bloodstream, a tiny portal through which the starfish borrows the sea's energy and turns it into movement. It allows the starfish to connect itself to its environment in a way that is deeply intimate. The same water that rushes over the coral, fills the tide pools, and crashes on the shore, that same water enters the madreporite and becomes the very force that animates the creature's body. What's even more poetic is that the madreporite reflects the starfish's way of life. Quiet, efficient, and patient. It doesn't rush, doesn't clamour for attention, it simply sits there, small and unassuming, calmly doing its work. Through it, the starfish listens to the sea. Through it, the sea speaks to the starfish. Every movement the starfish makes is the result of a conversation between creature and current, made possible by this tiny, stone-like spot. Scientists have found that when the madreporite is damaged or blocked, the starfish becomes paralysed, unable to move or feed. That's how crucial it is, and yet even in its importance it remains humble, hidden, and easily overlooked by those not trained to notice. It's a perfect reminder that the smallest parts of nature can hold the greatest power, that sometimes it is the quietest instruments that keep the symphony playing. As you sit back and imagine this creature slowly creeping along the seafloor, with hundreds of tiny feet pulsing in soft unison, remember that every gentle step is made possible by this one small portal. The madreporite may look like nothing more than a speck, but it is a living valve, a doorway to motion and a bridge between stillness and movement. A reminder, perhaps, that in our own lives, great strength often flows from the most subtle and hidden places. It may be difficult to imagine at first, a creature that can walk, eat and react to its environment without a brain. For us humans, the brain is everything. It is the seat of thought, the source of decisions, the command center of our entire being. Without it, we would not move, speak, or survive. So how is it that the starfish, this quiet, beautiful creature drifting along the ocean floor, is able to coordinate the movements of hundreds of tiny feet, react to danger, find food, and explore the underwater world, all without a single brain cell? This is one of the starfish's most extraordinary traits and one of the most humbling mysteries of nature. The The starfish is what scientists call a decentralized organism. That means there is no single control center, no master switch that gives orders to the rest of the body. Instead, intelligence, if we can call it that, is distributed. It is shared, yattered like grains of sand throughout the starfish's entire body. Rather than having a brain tucked inside a skull, the starfish relies on a delicate network of nerves. At the center of this system is a circular nerve ring that wraps around the mouth, located on the underside of its body. From this ring, 5 radial nerve cords extend outward into each arm. These nerves are not just communication lines, they are decision makers. Each arm has a surprising degree of independence. If one arm senses something, the touch of a rock, the movement of prey, the shift of a current, it can react immediately, without needing permission from a central brain. In fact, in some species of starfish, even if one arm is severed from the body, it can continue to move on its own for a time, exploring its surroundings, curling and uncurling like a creature with its own little mind. This phenomenon has led some scientists to describe the starfish as a collection of 5 semi-independent creatures, all working together in cooperation, a star-shaped society of limbs. The result is a kind of quiet brilliance. The starfish doesn't need to think in the way we understand thinking. It doesn't worry or plan, but it responds, constantly, subtly, wisely. If one arm senses food, it can begin to move toward it, pulling the rest of the body along. If an arm feels a threat, it can withdraw, prompting a shift in direction. The entire creature is guided not by central orders, but by collective awareness, a slow, gentle consensus formed by touch, pressure, and flow. This form of intelligence may seem alien to us, but in many ways it is deeply poetic. It reflects a kind of unity, a harmony that doesn't rely on hierarchy. There is no single leader, no brain shouting orders. Instead, the starfish listens to all parts of itself equally and allows the wisdom of the whole to guide its path. It's a living lesson in cooperation and quiet intuition. Of course, this decentralization does have its limits. The starfish cannot perform complex calculations or plan for the future. It doesn't build tools or recognize faces, but what it does possess is an incredible sensitivity to the present moment, to its surroundings, to the texture of the sand, to the slightest ripple in the water, to the pressure of a nearby shell. In the stillness of the deep sea, this awareness is often all that's needed. The starfish's entire existence is built on presence, on being exactly where it is, fully attuned to the here and now. It doesn't need a brain to chase a future. It doesn't need to remember the past. It simply moves, responds, and adapts, guided by a wisdom written not in thoughts, but in the gentle rhythm of nerves and currents. And in a world that often moves too fast, the starfish offers a quiet counterpoint, that you don't always need a head full of thoughts to find your way, that stillness can hold its own kind of intelligence, that there is power in simply being, not planning, not controlling, but sensing and flowing. So the next time you look at a starfish lying in a tide pool, climbing along a rock, or gliding slowly across the glass of an aquarium, remember that what you are seeing is something profound. A creature without a brain, yet not without awareness. A being without thought, yet not without purpose. A body guided not by command, but by connection. And perhaps in that soft, brainless grace, there is a quiet message that we too can sometimes let go of the need to control everything and simply trust the wisdom of our limbs, our senses, and the moment we're in. Imagine for a moment that each arm of a starfish is like a miniature explorer, fully equipped, independent, and quietly aware of its surroundings. It does not wait for instructions. It does not need orders from a boss. It simply begins to act, to sense, and to move, guided by its own local awareness. Now imagine 5 of these explorers, all joined at a central hub, constantly communicating but never arguing. They adjust, they adapt, and then they work together, without ever needing a single voice to lead them. This is how a starfish moves. This is how it lives. At the centre of a starfish's body lies a ring, not a visible one, but a hidden loop of nerves called the nerve ring. This is the starfish's closest equivalent to a brain, but even that comparison doesn't quite fit. Unlike our brain, which is large, central, and in control of all bodily functions, the nerve ring acts more like a switchboard, a place where signals come together and pass outward, but not a place where decisions are made in the traditional sense. Radiating outward from this nerve ring are 5 radial nerves, one running down the centre of each arm. These are the starfish's communication highways, delicate lines of signal and response that let each arm talk to the others. But here's the wonder. Each arm, with its radial nerve and array of sensory cells, acts like a semi-autonomous being. It can feel temperature, detect chemicals in the water, sense touch and vibration, and even detect light and dark. Each arm gathers information from the world and begins to respond before ever consulting the centre. This is why a starfish can function even after losing one of its arms. In fact, if a single arm contains part of the central disc, the portion where the nerve ring is located, it can often regenerate into a whole new starfish. It's as if each part contains the memory of the whole. No one piece is entirely dependent on the rest. Instead, each piece contributes, listens, and adjusts, a biological democracy in motion. When the starfish moves, it doesn't march forward like a creature with a head and legs. Instead, one arm begins to lead, pressing its tube feet into the surface, inching ahead. Then the others begin to follow, coordinating their steps in a quiet, rippling motion. But the leader can change at any time. If another arm senses something important, food, a hiding place, a shifting current, it can take over. The movement shifts direction, subtly, fluidly, without argument or resistance. This decentralized way of moving creates a starfish that is incredibly adaptable. It doesn't rely on one specific strategy or plan. Instead, it constantly adjusts to the environment in real time. If one arm encounters rough terrain while the others find smooth sand, it can slow down while the others continue forward. If a predator approaches from one side, the arms on that side can recoil while the others steer the starfish away. This flexibility is especially important in the unpredictable world of the ocean floor. Down there, nothing is guaranteed. Rocks shift, currents change, food appears and vanishes in moments. A creature with rigid instructions or a fixed command center might be too slow to respond. But the starfish, with its distributed intelligence and cooperative movement, is built for constant fluid adaptation. There's a strange and gentle beauty in this design. No part of the starfish dominates. No single arm rules the others. Instead, the whole organism functions as a team, with power shared equally, and each part playing its role based on what it senses in the moment. It's a biological system built not on hierarchy but on trust, an unspoken coordination that emerges naturally from the way the creature is wired. This makes the starfish not only a wonder of marine biology, but also a symbol of another kind of wisdom. The wisdom of cooperation, of decentralization, of quiet harmony. It reminds us that intelligence doesn't always wear the crown of a brain. Sometimes it flows like water, spreading out through the body, living in the limbs, dancing in the margins. To watch a starfish walk is to witness this harmony in action. As one arm stretches forward, another stabilizes the body. As one foot releases its grip, another secures the next hold. Every move is both independent and interconnected. There's no need for shouting, no top-down control. There is only the rhythm of listening and responding, sensing and adjusting all at once. And perhaps that is the starfish's quiet lesson to us, that we don't always need to think our way forward, that sometimes wisdom lives not in control, but in connection, not in command, but in communication. The starfish shows us that we too might find strength in shared understanding, in trusting the quiet signals that arise from all parts of ourselves. In a world that often values speed and central authority, the starfish is a reminder that slow, steady cooperation can achieve great things, that even without a brain there can be balance, even without a leader there can be unity, and even without a voice there can be meaning, spoken softly in the language of touch and time. The starfish lives in a world without clocks. There are no alarms to wake it, no deadlines to meet, no rush hours, no expectations. Its days are measured not in minutes, but in tides. Its movements are guided not by urgency, but by the gentle rhythm of the sea. And when it walks, if we can even call it that, it does so with a kind of patience that feels almost sacred. There is no hurry in a starfish, no anxiety, no wasted effort. Every motion is slow, deliberate, and purposeful. It is the embodiment of stillness in motion. Unlike creatures that dart, leap, or sprint, the starfish glides. Its tube feet press softly against the sand or the rough surface of a rock. One foot pulls gently forward, another releases, then another. There are hundreds of them working together, creating a slow ripple of movement that is almost imperceptible to the human eye. You could watch a starfish for minutes and be convinced it hasn't moved at all, but return later and you'll find it somewhere new. Slightly to the left, now clinging to a rock, or halfway across a tide pool, never having seemed to move at all. This slowness is not a flaw. It is not something to be corrected or apologized for. It is a survival strategy, a finely tuned balance between energy conservation and environmental sensitivity. The starfish does not burn fuel in haste. It does not exhaust itself, chasing prey or fleeing from every shadow. Instead, it conserves. It waits, it senses, and then it moves, gently, subtly, precisely. Its water vascular system, which powers its movement, is not designed for speed. It is designed for control, for delicate navigation across uneven and unpredictable surfaces. The pressure in each tube foot is adjusted with care. The suction it applies is light but firm. The release is smooth. There's no jerking, no stumbling, no collision. It is not trying to dominate its world. It is trying to move through it gracefully, like a leaf floating in a stream. To live this way requires a kind of trust, a surrender to the pace of the environment. The starfish doesn't fight the ocean. It doesn't resist the currents. It moves with them, working alongside the waves, climbing when needed, resting when the tides are rough. It is in tune with the quiet rhythms of nature, attuned to patterns we barely notice, the changing texture of sand, the faint pull of a current, the whisper of a predator's approach. Its slowness also grants it a certain invisibility. While faster creatures may draw attention, thrashing, flashing, dashing through the water, the starfish often goes unnoticed. And this works in its favour. Predators overlook it. Prey, like small mollusks, don't sense danger until it's too late. The starfish's patience becomes a kind of camouflage, a shield of serenity. There is also a kind of wisdom in the way a starfish moves. It doesn't go far, it doesn't wander aimlessly, it moves just enough to find what it needs, a safe place to hide, a meal to digest, a rock to cling to. Its entire life is lived within a small, familiar stretch of seafloor, and yet it thrives. It finds sustenance and safety not by racing through the world, but by becoming deeply intimate with its own little corner of it. And in its slowness there is time to sense every grain of sand, every shadow, every faint vibration. The starfish doesn't just move over its environment, it merges with it, feels it, becomes part of it. Its hundreds of tube feet act like tiny sensors reading the world in exquisite detail. Where we might rush past, the starfish lingers. Where we might overlook, it explores. This way of being is not foreign to us, we've simply forgotten it. In our lives, we are pushed to be fast, to respond instantly, to always be moving, always achieving, always accelerating. But the starfish reminds us that slow is not the same as weak. That stillness is not the same as idleness. In fact, there is great strength in restraint. There is clarity in calm. And there is power in doing things not quickly, but well. When you watch a starfish move, you're watching a creature that has found its pace, a rhythm that suits its needs, its body, its environment. It does not need to be faster. It does not wish to be something else. It is enough. It is whole. And it moves through life not with struggle, but with grace. So perhaps the starfish is not just a marvel of biology, but a gentle teacher in disguise. It shows us that we too can choose another pace, that we can move slowly with intention and still arrive exactly where we need to be, that life is not a race, it is a journey, and sometimes the most meaningful steps are the ones taken gently, deliberately, without noise. To move slowly like the starfish is not to fall behind. It is to be present. It is to feel the ground beneath you, to listen to the world around you, and to know where deep in your bones that you are not lost. You are simply taking your time. Beneath the surface of the ocean, where light flickers through shifting waves and silence reigns, starfish perform one of the sea's quietest miracles. With no spine, no bones, and no true muscles to speak of, they manage to climb. Slowly, patiently, they ascend coral walls, crawl over jagged rocks, and cling to vertical surfaces where gravity might defeat other creatures. But the starfish, gentle and determined, makes the impossible look effortless, all thanks to its extraordinary tube feet. At first glance, a starfish appears passive, almost as if it has been placed in its position by the tide and left there to rest. But nothing could be further from the truth. Beneath each of its 5 arms lies a vast army, hundreds of tiny, flexible hydraulic appendages known as tube feet. These soft, translucent limbs are barely a centimetre long, yet they are the starfish's primary tools for exploration, navigation, and survival. And when it comes to climbing, they are marvels of nature's ingenuity. Each tube foot is tipped with a delicate suction cup like a microscopic plunger. These cups don't rely on stickiness or glue. Instead, they use pressure, water, and vacuum. When the starfish wants to attach itself to a surface, it directs water from its internal water vascular system into specific tube feet, causing them to extend. Once extended, the tip flattens slightly and presses firmly against the rock or coral. Then, by releasing a bit of internal pressure, the foot creates a tiny vacuum seal, holding tight like a suction cup to a window pane. But this is not a one-time action. To climb even the smallest incline, the starfish must coordinate dozens or hundreds of these tube feet simultaneously. It's a slow ballet. Some feet release, some grip, some push, while others pull. There is no single pattern, no master foot that leads the way. Each tube foot acts independently but responds collectively. It's a living tide of movement that ripples beneath the starfish, carrying it upward in total silence. The terrain it climbs is rarely smooth. Coral reefs are jagged, pitted, and unpredictable. Rock walls may be covered in algae or seaweed, slick with moisture and shifting with the flow of the tide. But the starfish does not panic. It does not stumble. Its tube feet are so adaptable and numerous that they conform to every surface, adjusting their grip millimetre by millimetre. The starfish doesn't need to move quickly. It only needs to move surely. As the starfish ascends, it keeps its body close to the surface. Unlike animals that pull themselves upward, lifting and swinging their weight, the starfish creeps, always in contact with the rock beneath it, always anchored by dozens of active grips. This keeps it safe. If a wave crashes overhead or a predator passes nearby, the starfish can simply pause. With its tube feet suctioned tight, it can remain motionless for hours, unmoved by currents that might sweep other creatures away. Climbing is not just about reaching a better vantage point. For the starfish, it is a way of life. It climbs to hunt, to explore, to find shelter from the sun during low tide, or to rest in the shadows of an overhanging reef. Some starfish even use their climbing ability to reach their prey, like mussels and clams clinging to vertical rock faces. The starfish moves in, settles over its meal, and uses its powerful grip to pry the shell open with slow, unstoppable force. What begins as a climb ends as a feast. And the feat becomes even more impressive when you remember that all of this is accomplished without eyes, without bones, and without a brain. The starfish climbs not by planning its next step, but by sensing, by feeling its way upward, responding to texture, resistance, light, and chemical signals. Its tube feet are not just limbs, they are also sensory organs. As they press against the reef, they taste the surface, detect temperature, and pick up chemical cues from nearby animals. Every motion is informed, even if it appears instinctual. If you have ever seen a starfish in an aquarium pressed against the glass, you've witnessed this remarkable ability. Its arms cling firmly to the wall, slowly advancing across the vertical surface without pause or strain. Some people even try gently to peel a starfish off the glass, only to find it almost impossible without hurting the creature. The suction created by its tube feet is astonishingly strong for such a soft-bodied animal. And yet, with just a small release of water pressure, the starfish can let go instantly, gliding downward like a leaf. There is a kind of peace in watching a starfish climb. It moves so slowly that we are invited to slow down too, to breathe deeply, to notice the details, to appreciate effort that is neither flashy nor fast, but utterly persistent. It reminds us that climbing doesn't always mean struggle. Sometimes it means trusting your grip and taking your time and letting each small step do its part. In our world where achievement is often measured by speed and spectacle, the starfish offers a different vision. It shows us that there is power in quiet persistence, that you don't need to be fast to be successful, that sometimes the surest progress is the slowest. So when you picture a starfish scaling a reef or moving upside down along the curve of a tide pool, remember that beneath its stillness lies a symphony of motion. Hundreds of tiny feet are working in unison, listening to the surface, responding to the sea, and lifting the starfish and gently, patiently, higher and higher. Deep beneath the rolling waves, in the quiet, sun-dappled world of tide pools and rocky reefs, the starfish holds within its soft body a secret that borders on the mythical, the ability to regrow what has been lost. To us, the idea of regeneration belongs to fantasy. A lizard that grows back a tail, perhaps, or the imagined creatures of legends who heal in moments. But the starfish does more than just recover. It rebuilds, it remembers, and it grows again slowly and silently from what seems like nothing at all. This power, known as regeneration, is one of the starfish's most extraordinary gifts. If a predator bites off an arm, or a storm tears part of it away, the starfish does not panic, does not wail or bleed or thrash in agony. Instead, it begins the slow work of healing. Over the course of days, weeks, or even months, new tissues begin to form. Muscles, nerves, skin, and tube feet gradually reappear. And with time, a great deal of time, the arm returns, fully formed, as if it had never been lost. But even this, as miraculous as it seems, is not the full story. In some species, if just a single arm remains attached to a small piece of the central disc, the soft hub at the starfish's centre, that fragment alone can regenerate into an entirely new starfish. A whole being, born from a part. This is not just healing, it is rebirth. A kind of biological resurrection that defies our usual understanding of what life requires to continue. To understand how this is possible, we must look beneath the starfish's skin, not just at its anatomy, but at its remarkable ability to organize and rebuild. The tissues of the starfish are filled with specialized cells called undifferentiated cells, something like stem cells in humans. These are blank, flexible cells capable of becoming anything the body needs. When an injury occurs, these cells rush to the site and begin their work, transforming into muscle, skin, nerve, and connective tissue. And yet this isn't random growth. The starfish doesn't grow a strange lump or an unformed mass, it grows a new arm, precisely shaped, perfectly aligned, complete with hundreds of functioning tube feet, a radial nerve, and a vascular canal. It knows exactly what is missing and how to rebuild it. There is an intelligence at work here, not the kind that comes from a brain or conscious thought, but a quiet cellular wisdom that remembers what it means to be whole. Regeneration is not fast, it is not showy. A small arm may take months or years to fully grow back, but the starfish is in no hurry. It continues on, even incomplete, even injured. It eats, it moves, it lives. It knows that healing takes time, and it trusts the process. In this way, the starfish becomes a symbol of endurance, a creature that accepts loss but never gives in to it. A being that shows us, in its gentle way, how to move forward even when a part of us is missing. What makes this even more profound is that the starfish's arms are not just limbs, they are vital organs. Each arm houses part of the digestive system. Each one contains nerves and canals, and the machinery needed for motion. To lose an arm is to lose a significant portion of the body's function, and yet the starfish survives. It adapts, it shifts its weight, redistributes its motion, and continues to crawl along the sea floor as it waits for nature to catch up, for the missing piece to slowly return. Some species even seem to use regeneration strategically. If a predator grabs hold, the starfish may willingly shed an arm, a process called autotomy, sacrificing a part of itself to escape and live another day. It doesn't panic, it doesn't try to fight, it simply lets go of what it can afford to lose. And then, with astonishing patience, it begins the process of becoming whole once more. In a world that often feels obsessed with permanence, the starfish teaches us that impermanence can be beautiful, that losing something is not always the end, that what is broken can be rebuilt, not in a rush, not in desperation, but in quiet faith. Healing is not linear, it is not immediate, but it is possible, and sometimes it can lead to a new beginning, even more complete, more resilient than before. To see a starfish with one small arm just beginning to grow back is to witness hope in motion, a soft sprout, pale and tender, reaching out into the world, a reminder that even in the darkest times, life continues. The sea does not stop. The stars do not fall, and somewhere beneath the waves a gentle creature climbs slowly across the reef, one step at a time building itself anew. So when you look at a starfish, know that you're not only looking at a creature of the present, but a survivor of the past, a being that has lost and regrown, that has broken and healed, a quiet teacher showing us that wholeness is not perfection, it is persistence. It is the willingness to begin again. As the ocean darkens and the world above settles into sleep, the underwater realm awakens in a quiet, unhurried rhythm. For the starfish, night is not a time to rest, but a time to begin. The seafloor becomes its silent hunting ground, and with the falling of the sun's last light, it starts its gentle, deliberate journey. Walking not with feet, but with hundreds of soft, sticky tube feet that whisper across the sand. The starfish is a predator, though not in the way we usually think of one. There is no chase, no pounce, no blood or flash of teeth. Its hunt is a ritual of patience. It seeks out bivalves, clams, mussels, oysters, creatures that, like the starfish, are often still, clinging to rocks or half buried in the seafloor. These animals, with their hard protective shells, might seem secure in their defences, but the starfish is undeterred. It has evolved to do one thing very, very well: open what is meant to remain closed. Its journey to find food begins with sensing by not with eyes, but with its remarkable tube feet. Each foot acts like a finger and a nose combined, feeling the texture of the seafloor and detecting chemical traces left behind by prey. Starfish do not see the way we do. Some species possess simple eye spots at the tips of their arms, which can detect light and dark, but much of their navigation is through taste and touch. They glide over the sand like ghosts, their tube feet reaching, testing and searching. When a starfish finds a clam, it begins a dance as old as time. It climbs on top of its prey, arms wrapping around the shell with eerie grace. Then it begins to pull slowly, steadily, using the strength of dozens, sometimes hundreds of tube feet working in perfect coordination. It applies constant pressure. This is not a battle of speed, but of persistence. The clam, sensing the threat, clamps shut. It is strong, but it must also breathe. It must filter water. And eventually it tires. The starfish never does. It can pull for hours, even days. Its energy does not come from bursts of effort, but from quiet determination. And eventually the clam's muscles fatigue. Its shell opens, not with a snap, but with a trembling gap no wider than a hair. That's all the starfish needs. Now comes perhaps the most astonishing part of this ancient performance. The starfish, lacking a mouth in the usual sense, does something extraordinary. It averts, that is, pushes out, its stomach through its own body and into the shell of its prey. Like a ghost passing through a wall, the stomach slides into the clam's opening and begins to digest the soft tissues inside. The process is slow, quiet, and hidden from view. There is no chewing, no noise, just the gradual breaking down of the clam's body, right where it lies. Once the meal is complete, the stomach withdraws, returning to the starfish's interior with its dissolved prize. The starfish moves on, leaving behind an empty shell, a hollowed-out testament to a predator that makes no sound. This method of feeding, so unusual to us, is perfectly suited to the starfish's world. It allows it to consume prey larger than its own mouth, to hunt without needing to tear or bite. It is a form of digestion that mirrors the starfish itself, patient, methodical, and entirely unhurried. And while we may find this feeding behaviour strange, even eerie, it is a beautiful example of evolution's quiet brilliance. The starfish moving slowly across the ocean floor is not simply wandering. It is engaging in one of nature's most subtle forms of predation, one that requires no chase, no violence, only time and touch. During the day, starfish often hide in shadows or under rocks, away from the brightness of the sun and the eyes of predators. But at night, when the world softens and the sea becomes a dark, liquid sky, they emerge. Their tube feet press gently into the sand, their arms extend, their senses awaken, and they begin their slow pursuit, not with urgency, but with certainty. The ocean is vast, but the starfish is not afraid of its size. doesn't need to roam far, it doesn't need to swim fast. It simply moves forward, following the invisible trails left by other beings, guided by a hunger that does not roar but hums quietly within its body. Even as it hunts, there is something peaceful about the starfish's motion. It glides without stirring sediment, without sending ripples across the water. Its presence feels ancient, like a memory of a time before speed became a virtue. Watching it hunt is like watching the sea itself feed, slow, inevitable, and profoundly calm. And so, night after night, the starfish repeats its ritual. It walks across the seafloor, climbs over rocks, explores crevices, and finds what it needs in the stillness. It does not rush. It does not waste. It simply lives, one gentle step at a time, one silent meal after another, feeding not with violence, but with grace. In the darkness of the ocean, the starfish is not just a hunter. It is a reminder that survival need not be loud, that power can be soft, that even in the act of feeding there can be elegance, and that sometimes the quietest journeys are the most profound. The tides are the quiet heartbeat of the ocean. They rise and fall with a rhythm as ancient as the moon, drawing the sea in and out like a long, slow breath. Along the edges of coastlines, reefs, and known tide pools, the world transforms twice each day, and the starfish moves with it, patiently, gracefully, in tune with a rhythm it does not control, but understands completely. It is not separate from the tide, it is part of it. When the tide comes in, the world of the starfish expands. Waters surge gently into rocky crevices and over sandy shores, bringing with them food, oxygen, and new scents. The water's embrace lifts everything. The sea becomes weightless. Starfish that were once exposed to air or clinging tightly to rocks feel the soothing return of the tide and begin to stir. The water, now cool and oxygen-rich, carries signals from afar, the chemical traces of clams, decaying matter, or the presence of other marine life. It is in this moment of renewal that the starfish begins its slow movement. It doesn't rush toward its goal. The starfish does not swim, nor does it leap. Instead, it glides in a measured, almost reverent pace. Each of its tube feet grips the surface beneath it with quiet precision, holding, pulling, releasing, repeating. It can sense the change in water pressure, the shift in temperature, the soft tug of currents newly born from the returning tide. And in this gentle motion it sets out, seeking food, new ground, or simply the quiet satisfaction of movement. The incoming tide is not just water to the starfish, it is opportunity. It brings access to areas that were unreachable hours before, the undersides of stones, vertical reef walls, tide pools newly submerged. For a creature that moves with deliberate slowness, the tide is a gift. It raises the sea, and with it raises the entire world of the starfish. But when the tide retreats, a different kind of motion begins. As the ocean pulls back, the sea leaves behind temporary worlds, tide pools, damp sand, and shallow puddles carved into stone. These become small islands of life, rich with food but dangerous in their exposure. For many starfish, the outgoing tide is a signal to seek safety, to retreat into cracks, burrow under seaweed, or cling with fierce suction to the shaded side of a rock. The starfish knows the tide will return, and it trusts in that promise. It has evolved not to fight the rhythm of the sea, but to live within it. During low tide, some starfish may remain exposed to the air for hours, motionless and still, but even then they are not vulnerable. Their bodies are equipped to conserve moisture, to resist drying out. Their skin, often leathery or armoured with tiny plates, forms a barrier against the sun and wind. If you were to visit a tide pool during low tide, you might find one resting quietly, arms outstretched like sunbeams on stone. You might be tempted to think it is asleep or even dead. But look closely, and you might see a tube foot move, just one, testing the air, feeling the edge of the rock, waiting, and then, with the returning tide, it moves again. This relationship between starfish and tide is not passive. It is a kind of conversation. The starfish reads the signals of the sea and responds in kind. It follows the water where it leads, never fighting its flow, never forcing its way forward. It knows the tide will rise, and with it will come the means to travel, to eat, and to thrive. But it also knows the tide will fall, and in those hours of stillness, it teaches us the wisdom of patience. The starfish does not resist change. It moves with it. When the tide comes in, it moves outward. When the tide goes out, it draws inward. It expands and contracts like the sea itself. It teaches us that life is not about constant forward motion, but about moving in rhythm, about knowing when to act and when to wait. For coastal dwellers, tides are part of daily life, taken for granted perhaps, but for the starfish, they are everything. The tide is its clock, its compass, its breath. It eats when the tide allows. It hides when the tide demands. It climbs when the sea gives depth and rests when it retreats. There is no resistance, no frustration, no attempt to control, only surrender, the beautiful, knowing kind of surrender that comes from harmony with nature. If we could feel the tide as the starfish does, perhaps we would understand time differently. We would see that life is not about racing the current, but learning when to rise and when to be still, that every retreat is temporary, that the waters always return. The starfish does not fear the changing tide, it embraces it, with every arm, every foot, every quiet step across the ever-shifting sea floor. It walks to the rhythm of something larger than itself and finds its way again and again in perfect time. Somewhere in the secret cradle of the sea, where sunlight filters down in softened beams, and life begins on a scale too small for the human eye to grasp, a baby starfish takes its first steps, though not in the way we know steps. These early moments are not marked by footprints or visible progress, but by the gentle flexing of invisible limbs and the quiet stirring of cells awakening to purpose. At the beginning of their lives, starfish do not resemble stars at all. They begin as tiny, transparent larvae, no larger than a grain of sand, drifting freely in the open ocean. In this larval stage, they swim, suspended in the water column, moved by currents more than by will. They are plankton, riding the tides with thousands of other microscopic travellers. They have no arms, no tube feet, no ability to crawl. They are soft, simple, and astonishingly fragile. But within each larva lies a silent plan, an unfolding blueprint of transformation. As they feed on floating bits of algae and detritus, their bodies begin to change. Slowly, invisibly, the outline of their future form emerges. Tiny protrusions grow, cells migrate, a central disc begins to take shape. And then, at the moment known only to them, the baby starfish sinks gently to the ocean floor. This is where their true journey begins. Once settled, the larva undergoes a profound metamorphosis. In one of nature's most astonishing acts of shapeshifting, it reorganizes itself into the 5-armed form we recognize. Arms grow outward, tube feet develop along narrow grooves on the underside of each arm. The water vascular system, that strange and elegant internal network powered by the sea, forms and begins its gentle pulsing. And suddenly, the creature can move. No longer a drifting passenger, the starfish becomes a traveller, a seeker, a walker of the sea. These early movements are small, almost imperceptible. A single tube foot reaches forward, feeling the sand. Another follows. The baby starfish does not leap or crawl quickly. It does not yet possess the strength of its adult form, but it moves slowly, tenderly, and exploring the texture of its new world with each soft step. Every grain of sand is a mountain. Every piece of shell is an obstacle or shelter. And yet, The baby starfish moves with purpose, as though it knows it belongs here, as though the ocean floor were waiting just for it. What makes these early steps so miraculous is the quiet complexity behind them. Each tube foot, just a fraction of a millimetre long, is already equipped with the same functions as in adults. It can sense chemicals in the water, detect surfaces, and form tiny suction seals to pull the creature forward. The water vascular system, though small, is already pumping seawater through canals and ampullae, allowing the baby starfish to extend and retract its feet in an elegant rhythm. These systems, which seem so advanced in the adult starfish, are already functioning in miniature, like a symphony playing on a single violin string. Even in their smallest form, starfish are fully engaged with the ocean. They begin to search for food, tiny bits of algae, bacteria, and organic debris that drift down from the water above. They begin to grow cell by cell, building themselves slowly into stronger versions of what they already are, and through it all, they move, a millimetre here, a pause there, a slow crawl toward the shadow of a rock or the edge of a tide pool. There is something deeply humbling in this image, a creature barely visible to the human eye, taking its first steps across a world too large to comprehend, armed with nothing but softness, patience, and instinct. It is not guided by vision or memory. It has no parent to show it the way. It simply moves, following cues written into its body by countless generations that came before. And these tiny starfish, though they begin so humbly, carry within them the full power of regeneration, perception, and motion. They are not incomplete, they are simply new. Each one is a quiet promise of a being that will one day scale coral cliffs, outlast storms, and endure long after other creatures have come and gone. But for now, they take their time, they settle, they stretch, they walk. The journey from plankton to star is not quick. It can take months or even years before a baby starfish grows into full adulthood, depending on the species and the conditions of its environment. But there is no rush. The sea does not ask for speed. It only asks for presence, for patience, for persistence. And so the baby starfish continues its slow, quiet walk beneath the sea. A single point of life among millions, guided not by vision or voice, but by the touch of tube feet on sand, the whisper of water through canals, and the ancient rhythm of motion passed down through time. It does not know the vastness of the ocean, nor does it need to. All it needs is the next soft step, and the next, and the next. Because even the tiniest starfish, barely more than a breath of life in the water, knows how to begin. It knows how to walk. In the hush of the nearshore shallows where sunlight breaks into ripples of liquid gold, something so small it seems almost imagined begins its quiet debut. Suspended between gravity and buoyancy, a newborn starfish, no bigger than a single shimmering grain of sand, drifts like living stardust in the warm, gentle current. It is transparent, delicate, and everything about its existence is tentative, as though the slightest jolt of the world might send it scattering back into raw possibility. Yet within this fragile wisp of life resides an ancient blueprint, a patient instruction manual for becoming a creature of 5 radiant arms and 1,000 purposeful steps. For a time, this larval starfish is plankton, anonymous among billions, swaying into the open sea. It does not yet crawl, it pulses. Cilia, a halo of microscopic hairs, beat in mesmerizing spirals, spinning the lava through space, keeping it aloft in sunlit waters rich with microscopic algae. Every tiny mouthful of phytoplankton is an act of metamorphosis. Each ingested cell becomes fuel for transformation, building the cellular scaffolding of arms it does not yet possess. Somewhere deep in that crystal body, clusters of undifferentiated cells quietly shuffle, trading roles, rehearsing futures. Days slip by in shimmering columns of light. Nights descend in velvety blues. The lava rises toward the surface by evening to graze and sinks again by dawn to avoid the hungry eyes of small fish. In this vertical ballet, up for feasting, down for safety, it grows fuller, heavier, more complex, until at last an internal clock chimed by instinct says the moment has arrived. Tiny calcium carbonate plates begin to crystallize just beneath the surface of its skin, nascent armor knitting itself into the shape of a star unseen. The lava tires of drifting. Gravity, once a distant suggestion, becomes a tug. It answers by relinquishing its airy hold on the water column and sinking slow as a feather toward the mosaic seabed. Upon first contact with sand, the little star pauses, tasting the texture through organs scarcely formed, chemical receptors that decipher whether this patch of world is hospitable. It is. The transformation accelerates. What had been top and bottom flip inside out. Organs migrate. A new mouth opens on what will soon become its underside. 5 tiny nubs sprout and elongate, ghostly buds signalling the arrival of arms. Inside each, the water vascular system blooms like an invisible circulatory tree, branching canals that will soon ferry seawater to the very tips. Ampullae swell like pearly bulbs. Tube feet uncurl as translucent threads tipped with microscopic suction cups. Each cup is a promise of motion. When the final rearrangements settle, the lava has vanished, and in its place rests a star, a miniature avatar of its future self, no wider than a punctuation mark, yet complete in every sacred geometry. It flexes an arm. A single tube foot extends, glides over a grain of sand and contracts, then another. The movement is nearly imperceptible, as though the seafloor itself has exhaled. But to the newborn starfish, that first traction is thunderous. It has seized the world. Progress is measured in fractions of millimeters. A journey across the width of a fingernail might require hours of incremental pulls, each tube foot exploring, detecting salinity shifts, reading the faint chemical fingerprints left by algae and decaying detritus. There is no sense of failure, only the next tiny reach. When fatigue murmurs, the baby star clings in place. A crystal chrysalis resting under the sigh of passing currents while dissolved nutrients slip through its delicate skin, and the calcium plates beneath grow denser, stronger. Nights invite peril, shrimp that graze like cattle across the sand, nudibranches adorned in toxic colour, even the sweeping arms of large adult starfish that eclipse the juvenile in a single shadow. Yet danger teaches vigilance. Sensory cells embedded in each arm detect tremors, pressure changes, and faint chemical traces of lurking predators. The fledgling star responds not with flight, for speed is not its craft, but with stillness, flattening against the substrate. Tube feet lock down in silent prayer until the menace drifts on. Weeks lengthen into months. The baby starfish fattens on microalgae, and the slow rain of organic snow, minute fragments from life lived above. Its arms extend farther, their tips now flecked with rudimentary eye spots that discern brightness and gloom. Vision, even in this primitive form, refines movement. The star begins to shun harsh daylight that could dry its tissues should a tide retreat expose it. Instead, it chooses shaded crevices and the cool underpart of stone where moisture lingers longest. With growth comes audacity. The tiny star tackles its first vertical challenge, a pebble slick with diatom film. Tube feet pluck at the rock, hundreds of minuscule vacuums attaching and releasing in an unbroken ripple. Upward it creeps, conquering a distance equal to a skyscraper in its scale, and pauses at the apex to sample the microfilm, a feast of single-celled bounty invisible to anything lacking such patient pursuit. Every cell division, Every absorbed molecule, every soft victory over gravity stitches resilience into its body. The regenerative magic of the adult is already latent. Lose an arm now, and the stump will blossom anew, slower, perhaps, but no less determined. This capacity whispers a lesson written in the marrow of time, that fragility and recoverability can coexist, that to be breakable is not to be doomed, only to be tested. Slowly, the starlet's realm expands beyond the nursery of sheltered sand. It ventures towards tide pool labyrinths where water levels oscillate under the moon's choreography. Here, juvenile mussels anchor in clustered moonscapes, themselves no larger than sesame seeds, yet plenty for the growing predator. The starfish's stomach, once content with films of algae, entertains bold appetite. It envelopes a mussel, an embrace both tentative and absolute, and learns the sacred patience of exerting slow pressure until the shell's muscles sigh open. Victory arrives not with speed but with inevitability. Digestion unfurls, nourishment follows. Years will pass before this starfish matches the span of an outstretched human hand, but none of that future grandeur is absent now. It is simply coiled, waiting, trusting in the deliberate arithmetic of growth. And with each fraction of progress, the sea's lullaby surrounds it. Currents hum, sand grains tick against one another. Distant whales pulse infrasongs through the continental shelves. All of it is received in the delicate mesh of the starfish's sensory world, where vibration and taste and touch coalesce into a map more intimate than any chart of lines and latitudes. If we could shrink ourselves to kneel beside that young star, we would witness no frenzy, no frantic scrabbling to arrive, but an exquisite dialogue with time. We would see that in the ocean's oldest stories, survival is not a sprint, but a pilgrimage of incremental miracles. The starfish's infant steps remind us that beginnings are not defined by how far we travel, but by the simple, unassailable courage to move at all, to reach, to taste, to grow, to become. And so, beneath a cathedral ceiling of refracted light, the baby starfish persists. Tube feet stretch and settle, arms lengthen plate by plate. The water-vascular heart beats its watery pulse, in silence, in slowness. The tiniest star walks, one nearly invisible stride after another, writing the opening chapter of a life that will span storms, tides, and seasons yet unborn. Find a quiet corner of the aquarium, away from the chatter and the clicking phones. Press your palms to the cool glass, feel the gentle hum of pumps and filters behind the walls, and let the world's busy soundtrack fade to a distant murmur. In that hush, lower your gaze until it meets the ocean in miniature, an artificial tide pool glowing with soft blue light. There, balanced between stillness and motion, a single starfish unfurls like a living compass rose on the seabed. Nothing about the scene demands attention. The lighting is subdued, the colours muted, the creature itself half hidden beneath pale sand and broken shell. And yet the longer you watch, the more the starfish reveals an entire philosophy whispered through the unhurried choreography of tube feet. At first it seems inert, more sculpture than life. Each arm lies outstretched, dusted with grains that drifted down hours ago. Tiny bubbles cling to its rough skin, as if decorating the creature with pearls. But as seconds stretch into minutes, subtlest shifts begin. A single arm glides forward no thicker than a thought. Its tip settles against a pebble and rests. Then along the underside, dozens of tube feet emerge, translucent, glistening, each no wider than a hair's breadth. They extend, grip, release. Another arm follows. The starfish advances by barely perceptible increments, so slow your breathing seems like thunder in comparison. Allow your focus to narrow on a single tube foot. Watch it inflate, flatten against the glass and create a tiny vacuum seal that dwarfs any precision human engineering could match. Water pulses down a microscopic canal. The foot lengthens, contracts, pulls the body an almost invisible distance forward. Beside it, another foot does the same, then another, until a ripple of movement passes down the arm, hundreds of feet acting in concert without a conductor. There is no giant muscle flexing, no decisive push, just a seamless handoff of intention from one cell to the next, as if the starfish were a living whisper travelling through water. Notice how each arm negotiates its own terrain. One pushes over a ridge of coral rubble, another tunnels beneath a lip of rock. The entire body bends in slow surrender to obstacles, never brute forcing its way, but flowing, adapting, draping itself across irregularities as silk clings to stone. The starfish teaches physics through patience, friction, leverage, suction, and balance expressed in increments so gentle that even nearby shrimp remain undisturbed. You begin to sense that speed is not the only measure of mastery. Here, mastery is measured in unwavering intention and the refusal to waste energy on haste. Your heartbeat slows to match. The glass beneath your palms grows colder as time pools around you, and for a moment the boundary between human and seawater feels porous. You can almost taste brine on the air, hear distant whale song twine with the hush of circulating pumps. Thoughts, those restless sparks, begin to drift, settling like sand around the starfish's arms. The to-do lists fade, the deadlines fade. A gentle void opens, filled only with soft pulses of water inside tube feet and a creature's quiet certainty that the next millimetre forward will arrive exactly when it should. Occasionally light shifts as a cloud passes outside, and the aquarium's glow changes from sapphire to jade. Shadows ripple across the starfish's skin, revealing textures, tiny ossicles arranged like mosaic tiles, each catching light in a slightly different way. Minute spines guard the delicate epidermis, but even they seem relaxed, holding no tension, simply existing. You realize the starfish is neither fragile nor armored. It occupies a middle ground where resilience is achieved through yielding. Push against it with gentle pressure and it molds. Apply force too quickly and it sheds an arm, trading flesh for freedom. It is a master of soft strength. Imagine the distances it crosses nightly on a real reef, meters that would scale to kilometers in human strides, seeking clams to envelop, algae to graze, crevices to shelter in when dawn flood shallows with brightness. All of that immense effort distilled into the minute drama in front of you. Here and now, though, its world is a glass wall and a velvet carpet of crushed coral. It does not pine for open oceans, it simply explores what is given. Acceptance is not resignation. Acceptance is engagement without resistance. Perhaps another visitor passes behind you, footsteps echoing, a child's voice bursting with excitement. You notice but do not turn. Your attention remains tethered to the starfish and their noise recedes into the muffled blur of life outside this moment. In an era of infinite scroll and algorithmic urgency, you have found a pocket of slowness so dense it eclipses everything else. Time feels viscous, stretching, bending until you are not merely observing calm, you're inside it, breathing it, wearing it like water. The starfish pauses, if you can call any segment of its perpetual crawl a pause, and test the current with sensory cells, tube feet flicking in exploratory arcs. Perhaps it detects the faint tang of brine from an automated feeder above. Perhaps it simply feels for texture, sampling each surface the way we might read Braille. In that quest for information, there is no anxiety about choosing wrong. There is only curiosity unfolding at the speed of certainty. Let your gaze widen. See how the aquarium glass refracts light into wavering ribbons across the sand. See how minute motes drift like cosmic dust in a galaxy turned sideways. Realize that you are witnessing solar systems of interaction writ small: gravity, buoyancy, orbits, tube-foot cycles, star migrations, arms spiraling outward. The cosmos is mirrored here in a creature no one hurries, no one applauds, that will outlive many storms and maybe your own memory of this afternoon. Stay until you sense the rhythm of its movement imprinted beneath your sternum, until even your smallest fidget feels like abrupt violence. You may eventually step back, stretch stiff shoulders, and rejoin the tide of people and notifications. When you do, the starfish will remain, poised mid-stride, unmoved by your departure, continuing its pilgrimage across a landscape that renews with every intake of breath. Carry the image with you, the slow ripple of tube feet, the refusal to rush, the incremental mastery of terrain, and let it surface whenever the modern world compresses you into urgency. Remember that progress can look like stillness stretched thin, that journeys can be measured in millimeters and still encompass whole galaxies of meaning, that a creature without spine or haste exemplifies a poise we forget is possible. And should you ever lose the thread of calm, return, if not to the aquarium, then to the memory. Close your eyes, press phantom palms against imagined glass, and find again that creature writing poetry in the language of patience across the floor of an endless luminous sea. Feel the subtle pull of the tide as it eases you back toward the shore, an unseen hand guiding mind and body toward rest. Somewhere out beyond the breakers, starfish still wander the dim ocean floor, unhurried and intent. But here in the shallows, the seascape softens into lullaby. The water grows warmer, clearer, thinner, until each incoming ripple traces silver lace along the sand. Tiny bubbles hiss, then burst, like a whispered applause for all you have witnessed. The crawl of tube feet, the hydraulic sigh of hidden canals, the quiet resilience of a creature that turns stillness into motion. Breathe in the salted breeze and sense how the whole world seems to exhale with you, synchronizing pulse to surf, thought to wave, heartbeat to moon-drawn current. Beyond the tide line, the long shadows of dusk stretch over tide pools where young starfish cling beneath curtains of seaweed. They've weathered the day's bright eye and now bask in blue hour calm, grateful for the cool return of water. Their tiny tube feet test the evening tide, pressing into sand softened by the sun's retreat, savouring the hush that settles when gull cries fade into the distance. As you wade closer to land, the rhythm of the ocean lingers in your muscles. Your steps mark sand that will soon be rewritten by the night's high tide, proof that nothing stays fixed for long, yet everything endures in cycles. Think of the starfish and its faith in those cycles, its willingness to pause when waters slip away, its certainty that the sea will always come back. In that trust lies a lesson etched into every grain beneath your feet, one of patience, of acceptance, of quiet endurance. Above, the sky shifts to twilight lavender. The first evening star pierces the firmament, reflected in pools left shimmering among scattered shells. It twinkles in liquid mirror just as the starfish once twinkled beneath deeper water, two kinds of stars stitched together by the same vast story. You realize that the universe has folded in on itself here, celestial above, celestial below. Out there, stellar fusion, down here, radial symmetry, both glowing softly in the fading light, both reminding you that wonder is scaleless, waiting wherever attention lingers. Allow the day's final warmth to rise off the sand and cradle your souls. Feel each footstep grow slower, heavier, then lighter again, as if buoyed by memory rather than gravity. The scent of drying kelp mingles with distant bonfire smoke, creating an aroma equal parts wild and comforting. A faint rhythmic creak carries from a weather-worn pier. Ropes and planks converse in woodwind whispers, echoing the low, contented thrum of the ocean's pulse. Even the air seems to move with starfish tempo, unrushed, measured, mindful. Pause at the edge of the dunes and look back once more. The horizon blends sea and sky into a single silken band, the colour of dreams half remembered. Somewhere within that dissolving line, starfish begin their nocturnal wanderings. One finds a mussel embedded in rock and settles into its patient vigil, tube feet anchoring in a slow-motion embrace. Another discovers the concave safety of a shell fragment, curling beneath it like a living constellation that has tumbled from the heavens. Their composure seeps into you, as if transmitted through the very mist that kisses your cheeks. Now turn toward the land. The grains beneath your toes are still damp. They cling softly, imprinting each step with fleeting testimony. In moments, wind and tide will erase the marks, returning the beach to unblemished silence, proof again that endings are never truly final, only invitations to begin anew. As you walk, imagine yourself carrying a small reservoir of seawater within, a private tide you can summon whenever life accelerates too loud, too bright. Close your eyes and feel hydraulic calm infuse your own limbs like invisible tube feet grounding you to the earth. When at last you reach the threshold of your resting place, perhaps a cozy room, perhaps a waiting bed, bring the starfish with you, not in body but in essence. Let its gentle determination guide the release of tension from shoulders, jaw, brow. Let its unhurried pace dictate the slowing of thoughts tangled by the day. Picture each exhale as a retreating wave, each inhale the tide's promising return. Trust, as the starfish does, that everything you need will flow back to you in time. Soon darkness will settle fully, and the steady hush of night will lull starfish, shoreline, and soul alike into a shared repose. Dreams may carry you seaward again, perhaps gliding beside a living carpet of tube feet across moonlit sand, perhaps drifting upward as a twin with constellations in a sky unbroken by city lights. Wherever slumber leads, know that the ocean's quiet miracle accompanies you, a reminder that life's grand journeys often unfold one small, deliberate, wondrous step at a time. Rest now. The tide will keep its watch, the starfish will keep its faith, and the gentle rhythm of water on shore will keep the pulse of peace alive until morning calls you back to wakefulness.